Today we're talking about how to handle difficult clients, okay? Difficult clients, disruptive clients, clients that are causing you a bit of an issue, clients that quite frankly are a pain in the ass. If we're being honest about it, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about those kind of clients. Now, there is another word for those types of clients. There is a more polite word than pain in the ass. And that term or word or whatever, it's not a word, it's more than one word, so it's a term, is a low compliance client. Okay, now everybody listening to the podcast, I want you to make a note of that because naturally you are now moving towards becoming highly qualified coaching masters that are going to change the world. So it's very important for you to know what a low compliance client actually is. Let me introduce you to a scenario. Let's say you have started coaching a new client and this brand new client is ready, okay? They turn up, they have big goals, they have aspirations, they want to change their life, they want to be able to move forward and become the person they always knew they could be, right? And what you do is you put an action plan together, you discover more about this person, you ask really powerful questions, you point them in the right direction based on what it is they want and what it is they need, and you look forward to witnessing the results. You look forward to seeing them again next session so you can witness just how far they've come. And then the next session rolls around and they've not done anything. They've taken no action. They've not moved forward in any way. They've taken no steps. And not only that, they're now starting to look to you to be the reason for this. Now, this happens, right? This happens. And this is why this podcast episode is going to be very important, because what we need to learn how to do is nip it in the bud. We need to stop that from happening because your clients, it's their responsibility to move forward, take action, and achieve their goals. It's their responsibility to want it. It's their responsibility to do the things required in order for them to reach the levels of success that they want. You're there to facilitate, you're there to help, you're there to ask the right questions, to shift their perspective, raise their awareness, shine a mirror on their blind spots. But they are the ones that must take the action. You cannot take the action for your clients. But having said that, not a lot of the time, this can be quite a rare occurrence, but some of the time, there are those clients that don't take the action, that are low compliance clients. And then they look to you and they think, well, what's wrong with the process? What's wrong with my coach? Why is it not working, right? Quote marks. Nothing to do whether it's not working. It's got everything to do with what we're going to go over throughout this podcast. Now, your clients, they could be unmotivated. They could be stubborn. They could be argumentative. They could be putting up barriers every single step of the way. They can create a problem for every single solution. They can be down. They can be upset. They can just full blown stop you in your tracks near enough every time you try to offer up a different perspective or offer up a shift in awareness. Any question you ask, any action plan you try to put together, anytime you try to challenge, question, or indeed even try to see this situation that they're in from somebody else's perspective, God forbid, right? There's just a lot of the time with these low compliance clients, the stubborn ones, the argumentative ones, the ones that are difficult, the ones that are disruptive. It does happen, okay? It does happen. So there's one thing that I want you to remember. What we're going to do today is we're going to go over 5 steps, okay? 5 very, very specific steps that will help you when you're faced with one of these clients. Now, it's important to mention as well that not all clients are like this. You know, a lot of the time you have those clients that are ready to do what it takes. And you create those action plans, you shift those perspectives, you shift that awareness, and then they're on it. Right? They fully understand, they're fully aware, they're fully open, they're ready to make a change, they're ready to take action. And then by the time the next session comes rolling around, they've created massive progress in their life, right? And they're responsible for that also, which is great. So it's not all the time, but when you are faced with one of those difficult clients, I want you to remember the 5 steps that we're going to be talking about today. Before we talk about the 5 steps, I want you to remember that change is difficult. When you're trying to create drastic change in your life, whether it be your professional life, your personal life, your mindset, your relationships, change is difficult. Change is always hard because it's unknowing, isn't it? It's uneasy territory. Change can be very empowering, but a lot of the time, in order to feel the empowerment that change brings, you have to go through deep moments of discomfort. Now, it's because of these deep moments of discomfort that most of the time, that is where your disruptive clients, that's why they'll be disruptive. That's also often why you have clients that are difficult to deal with, because they're struggling with the idea of the change that you are trying to create together. And that is understandable. It's also really important to understand that people get stuck at different places and for different reasons. One thing that we do as the coach is we often look in and try to understand why our client is stuck or being disruptive from our own perspective and our own point of view. And that can be dangerous because if we're looking inwards at the client, wondering why is it they're being disruptive? Why is it they're being difficult? Because I wouldn't find this difficult. I wouldn't find this uneasy. I wouldn't be scared of making that change. It's a very difficult and dangerous place to be that as a coach, because what you're doing is you're projecting your own viewpoints, your own awareness, your own understanding upon your client in order to try to get an understanding of what it is they're thinking and feeling. But what we want to be doing is we want to be asking them. Now, this is involved in the 5 steps, right? So I'm going to dive into that in a minute. But the main point I'm making right now is that as a coach, as a coaching master, we absolutely must have a full, rich understanding that people, different people, get stuck at different places for different reasons. There is no cookie cutter client. There is no template. There is no blueprint. Everybody is completely different. So if we just remember those 2 things as we embark upon the next 5 steps that I'm going to talk about, if we just remember those 2 things, 1, that change is hard, and 2, that people get stuck at different places for different reasons, what it allows us to do is it allows us to be a bit more understanding when we get a difficult client and when we get a disruptive client. Because it will happen, and I promise you, it is not the end of the world if that happens. It's not the end of the world. It's fine if that happens. We just must remember those 2 things and follow the next 5 steps. This is going to be a very good source of learning also for you. Getting these disruptive clients, getting these difficult clients is very good for learning, because that is the big question, isn't it? It's like, well, if they are stubborn, if they are argumentative, if they are unmotivated, if they are difficult, if they are disruptive, how do we do that? How can we get them to shift their mindset in a way and in a direction that's going to help them? So step number 1, okay? Step number 1 is often the most difficult step, because when we are faced with a client that's disruptive and stubborn, it can be difficult to try to gain an understanding of step number 1, because as human beings, we may be coaches, but we're still human. We can put up our own defenses. And what we need to try to do is we need to just try to lower those defenses with the understanding of the 2 things I mentioned, that change is hard and people get stuck in different places. And by lowering our defenses, we then want to know, what is step number 1? Step number 1 is gain an understanding on why they are struggling. Okay? Now that's phrased very, very specifically. It's not gain an understanding on why they're stubborn, not gain an understanding of why they're disruptive. It isn't about gaining an understanding of why they're difficult. It's about gaining an understanding of why they are struggling. Because there's one thing that you can near enough guarantee. The reason as to why they're being stubborn, the reason as to why they're being disruptive is because they are struggling with something. There is something that they are finding uneasy, uncomfortable, and they're having a difficult time with this. And that could be for various different reasons. We want to know what is holding them back. What's holding them back? Is it a lack of clarity? This is one that we see all too often, that our clients are not entirely clear as to what it is they feel they must do or the direction they must move in. Often we find clients that will sit there and nod and go, yep, and they'll answer our questions. But if they haven't yet quite achieved that level of clarity that they need to be able to move forward and progress and take action, if they're lacking in clarity, they're not going to do it. So one very good way of overcoming that is over-clarifying. Right? Don't be scared to over-clarify. Do you fully understand what it is you need to do? Do you fully understand where it is you need to look? Do you fully understand what it is you feel you need to focus on? You've mentioned you will have this shift in perspective. You've mentioned there will be this raise of awareness. You mentioned you will talk to that person. You will go to that place. You will look inwards to understand your own limiting beliefs. Whatever it is you've gone over at the time, just re-clarify it, re-clarify, and let your client know that it is completely a safe space for them to say, you know what? No, I don't fully understand it. I don't really get it. I'm not clear on what it is I must be doing, thinking, feeling, because a lot of our times our clients do find themselves in that world, that haze of confusion. That's why we're there to ask the right questions. Because don't forget, that's what we're doing as coaches. We're not giving advice. We're not telling people what to do. We're extracting information from our clients. We're not pouring information in. But through asking the right questions, we can allow our clients to gain better clarity around who they are, what they want, where they are, what they need to do to achieve their goals. But don't be scared to re-clarify. Don't be scared to ask again and again. Do they lack understanding of what it is they need to do? Do they lack an understanding of what it is they're thinking, what it is they're feeling, the people they find themselves around? Do they lack an understanding of where their passion lies or what it is they're doing as a career? There's so many different things as to why a coach will approach a client. So it's very difficult to give examples all of the time because there are so many thousands of different examples. But as coaches, the type of things that you coach your clients around. Now, what you're coaching them on, do they have a lack of understanding? Again, is there that lack of clarity? Is there a low motivation to achieve what it is they have set out to achieve? Another thing that you'll see as well is it's not that uncommon for day one, session one, for your clients to say, this is what I want. Okay, this is what I want and that's what I'm going to go for. But all too often what we see is that our clients say that they want to achieve one thing, but it's only because that's a replacement for something else, or it's covering up what it is they really want. They may say, this is a goal that I want to achieve. This is a direction that I want to move in. But in reality, that is acting as a cover up for what it is they really want to do and where they really want to go and who they really want to be with. So if they're moving towards a goal that really isn't for them, and really isn't the thing that fuels them with motivation, they're not going to make progress. They're not going to step forward. They're not going to take action. So we want to find out, how are they feeling? Are they feeling anxious about the process? Are they feeling depressed in this moment in time? What are they thinking? Are their thoughts holding them back? Are their thoughts focused and geared towards everything that will be wrong about the process opposed to the things that they may achieve? What they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're struggling with, is it a lack of clarity? We are not the ones to say where they're struggling. But when it comes to step number one, even though we talk about some common occurrences, okay, like lack of clarity, feeling anxious, a lack of understanding, in reality, your client needs to tell you, okay? Your client needs to let you know what it is they're struggling with. So when it comes to step number one, all we really have to do in that instance is have an understanding that change is difficult, have an understanding that people get stuck at completely different places, and simply ask. That's it. Step number one is about asking. Exactly specifically, what is it that you're struggling with? I understand that you're struggling. I recognize that you're struggling. I see that. And I want to be able to help you move past that. So what I need to know is where specifically are you struggling? If you can identify it, point out to me the exact thought, the exact feeling, the exact action that you're struggling with. Gain clarity, gain clarity, gain clarity. Step number 1 is oh so important, because unless we fully understand what our client is struggling with, we will never truly be able to help them. And they will always, throughout your entire coaching relationship, your entire coaching program, they will remain to be disruptive, remain to be stubborn. They will remain to be difficult because we have not taken the time to try to gain clarity around where specifically they are having a difficult time, where specifically they're struggling. It's only through identifying that we will be able to move in the right direction and help them, because they might not be aware. This is the key thing, you see. This is the key thing. We always say within the world of coaching, there's one word that we absolutely love, and that word is awareness. Awareness is key. We must raise our clients' awareness. As a coach, we are there as a mirror that must be held up to show them their blind spots, to show them where they're struggling, to show them what they're missing. As human beings, we can't see our own blind spots. We must have a coach shine a mirror on those blind spots and allow us to raise our own awareness. Your client, it's very possible that they are not entirely clear around where it is they're struggling. And because they're not clear where they're struggling, that's why they're being disruptive. That's why they're being difficult. That's why they're being argumentative. That's why they're being stubborn. It's not because they're a stubborn person. It's not because they're an argumentative person. It's not because they're always really difficult. They're labels. They're generalizations. They're things that as coaching masters, we want to completely avoid. Labeling someone as difficult, stubborn, argumentative. That may be our experience of them, but as their coach, we want to help them overcome that. So that is step number 1. Find out exactly, specifically, gain an understanding of where and why they are struggling. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to gain an understanding of that. We want to raise their awareness around that. And that is going to be the thing that we want to focus on. So then we move on to step number 2. Okay, so step number 1, we've gained the awareness around why they're struggling, where they're struggling. Step number 2 is identify exactly what they need. Now we know where the problem area is. We then want to move on to step number 2, identify exactly what they need. Now, there are 3 reasons, generally, 3 reasons why these low compliance clients happen. Okay, there are 3 reasons as to why we get those clients that are stubborn and argumentative and difficult. A, as we know, there's a lack of understanding, right? There's a lack of understanding and change is difficult. Okay, we know that. The second thing is that they're not confident in their own ability to take action. All right, this is now a double whammy. Not only is change difficult, and not only is there a lack of clarity and understanding around what it is they need to do, but they're not even confident in their ability to actually take action. Okay? Now, this is really key because all too often when your client lacks confidence in any area of the process, they're not going to move forward with the process. And if your client lacks confidence in any area of the process, you may be surprised by this, but it's actually not very common for them to tell you about that. A lot of the time what happens with clients is they're feeling unconfident throughout one part of the process and they don't mention it. They don't say anything about it. They keep it to themselves because there's a part of them that thinks, well, it's just part of the process. Maybe I should find this very difficult. Maybe I shouldn't be very confident in this area because I'm trying to create change. But the problem there is that if there is a part of the process that your client is very, very unconfident with, they're not going to take action. And if they don't take action, they're not going to create change. And if they don't create change, they're not going to create results. And therefore, by the end of the coaching program, if there are no results, then what was the point? There was no point. And I'm not talking about only just physical results from outside of themselves, like earning more money or traveling more or having a better job or whatever. I'm also talking about internal results, those results of being able to eliminate depression, eliminate anxiety, to be able to shift their perspective and gain an understanding of what it is their partner was thinking and what their partner was saying, or developing a better relationship with their kids or loving themselves. There's external results and internal results. We're looking for both. But if your client is lacking in confidence when it comes to any part of the process, they're not going to take the action required. We focus heavily on increasing confidence. Heavily. Because if your client is lacking in confidence in any part of the process, they're not going to move forward. So what you then want to do is you want to say, right, okay, I've identified that. Stop that a minute. Let's park everything up and let's just focus on increasing your confidence in this one area, with this one moment in your life, with this one thought, this one feeling, this one relationship, whatever it is. Let's just focus on increasing your confidence in that one area so you can just take a baby step forward towards achieving your goal. You can just take a small step forward towards taking action. Because if they lack that confidence, it's going to be very difficult for them to move forward. And what will happen? They will just become disruptive. The third reason as to why generally this happens is because your client lacks clear instruction. That's another big thing. When you get to the point of the process where you're putting together action plans, you may very well feel as though that the action plan is completely clear and that if you were to follow the action plan, you would be able to achieve the goals and take the action required. Let's not make the assumption that's the same for the client. Okay, we can't make that assumption. If there is a lack of clear instruction around the action plan that you create with your client, once again, they're not going to take the steps. And then you're going to approach them for the next session, and they're not going to have done any of the things that you set out in that action plan. So those are the three reasons, right? The three reasons. Now, and the reason why these three reasons are really important is because the chances are what they need is to remedy one of these things. Either the lack of understanding as to what it is they need to do, because change is hard. There's a lack of understanding around how it is they should be thinking or feeling. Just total lack of clarity. That's a killer. They're not confident in their ability to take action. Or there's a lack of clear instruction when it comes to the action plan. Sometimes those three things combined happen. And we wonder as to why we have difficult clients or disruptive clients. So anyway, let's recap, right, what we've done so far. So step number one is we gained an understanding as to why they are struggling from their perspective specifically. Step number two, we then identify what is it you need in order to fix this, right? Knowing what the three main reasons for a disruptive client are, I want to just find out from the client with that in mind, what is it you need? How can we overcome this? What will make you feel better about the process? What will allow you to increase your confidence in your ability to take action? What will give you a much clearer clarity around what it is you need to be thinking and feeling and doing? What do we need to do in order to develop clearer instruction around an action plan at the end of all of this? Just again, it's just total clarity. It's being inquisitive. That's what it is. It's about being inquisitive. Throughout the whole process, being inquisitive, asking questions, wanting to know more, not being dismissive, not yet at this stage closing the door and saying, well, that's just a difficult client. That's just a disruptive one. That's one of the rare ones that I'm not going to be able to work with. We've got to give it a chance at least. We need to give it a chance. So be inquisitive. Okay, step number 3 is co-create and educate a new action plan. Now, what do I mean by that? Now you've taken the time to understand exactly why they're struggling and where they're struggling, which is step number 1. And you've taken the time to understand exactly what it is they need in order to overcome that struggle, which is step number 2. Now you've got a much clearer idea of the type of action plan that you can put together with them, not for them, with them, based on the feedback that you've got because you've been inquisitive this entire time. So you co-create a brand new program, action plan, future. You get them involved in the process as much as possible. When it comes to these disruptive clients, these difficult clients, it doesn't often work in your favor or in their favor if you're essentially just creating action plans and you're thinking from your perspective what will be very good for them. It's the same with most clients. They of course need a massive part. They play a huge part of the entire process when it comes to creating an action plan. But sometimes you get those clients where they're so easygoing and they take action immediately once it's suggested, that you do get to a point where you get a very firm understanding of the direction they're moving in, what it is they need, what it is they're thinking, feeling, and you can create action plans for them. When it comes to a difficult client or a disruptive client, that is not the case. You definitely want to be co-creating action plans with them. Create the action steps with them. Don't tell them what to do. What new behaviors do they want to adopt? What works for them? Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And here's another tip as well. Here's a huge tip. Trying to change more than one behavior at a time is very difficult. It's very difficult. And a lot of the time, what coaches are experiencing when they're experiencing a disruptive client or a difficult client is they're actually attempting to try to create too many changes in that client's life. Now, there's a few different studies that have been done that indicate that the moment you try to create a second change, right, at the same time, simultaneously as the first change, your level of success of being able to create two different changes at the same time drops to about 30%. It drops from 90% to 30%. And then if you try to create three different changes at the same time, it drops all the way down to like 5%. We, in a world of multitaskers, want to be single taskers. We want to be able to introduce our clients to the ability of just focusing on one change at a time, one task at a time, and not overwhelm them with the process. It's very difficult. It's almost impossible to create more than one drastic change at once. We must be focusing on them as one at a time. So the most important part there is asking them again, what change is most important to them? What is the one change that they can create today that will create a drastic positive difference to this process? Whether it is a physical change, a mental change, an emotional change, a relationship change, we want to focus on one at a time, one at a time. And by doing that and knowing what is the number one change they want to make right now, we co-create an action plan with them to help them overcome and create that change and move forward. Just think about those 3 steps at this point. And bearing in mind, there's only 3 or 5 that we've gone over so far. You have taken the time to gain a full understanding of where it is they're struggling and what they're struggling with. You've not been dismissive and calling them difficult. You've made the effort to gain an understanding of what they're struggling with. Then you moved on to step number 2 and you identified exactly what it is they need in relation to the struggle. You have identified exactly what they need as an individual in relation to what they're struggling with as an individual. And then you've made the decision by moving on to step number 3 that you're only going to focus on creating one change at a time, baby steps, and you're going to co-create with them the action plan that they need to create that one change. You're giving this client so much more love and attention than I can promise you, than what they would be expecting. Because a lot of the time as well, when it comes to difficult clients and disruptive clients, they almost expect to be dismissed. They expect to be left so that they can go about their day saying, I knew it. I knew I was unhelpable. I knew I was beyond being looked after. I knew it. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. No one else can help me. That's the problem, you see. A lot of the time, people will like that opportunity to be able to say, oh, well, you know what? I gave it a shot. It didn't work out. And they'll move on to the next thing and they still won't be happy. As coaching masters, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, we're going to give them the love, the attention that they deserve and that they need, and we're going to take them through those steps. Step number 4 is a step just specifically for you as a coach. You can involve them in this, but step number 4 is about reviewing and learning from this experience. There's no point experiencing a difficult client, right? There's no point experiencing a disruptive client if we're not going to, 1, help them, and then 2, learn from the experience, right? So we must learn from the experience. So as the coach, you need to be asking yourself, why did this happen? Was it a lack of clarity? Was it a lack of understanding? Was it a lack of instruction? Was it a lack of motivation because the goal wasn't really for them? Was it a sense of depression that interfered? Was it a sense of anxiety that interfered? Was it a damaged relationship that they were in, which I didn't address or I didn't ask them about? What was it that created the disruptive nature of that one client? Because once again, we don't simply dismiss them and say, well, that's it, they're just a disruptive person. We don't do that. We ask ourselves, why did this occur? How did this happen? How can I prevent that from happening again in the future is a big one. Ask your client as well, what could I have done differently in the early days? In the first session, in the second session, what could I have changed? What could I have done differently that would have affected this experience, right? That would have allowed you to have had a more positive experience from the beginning, that would have allowed me to be able to identify these things quicker. Ask them. Step number 4 is review and learn. We have to review and learn from the experience. Now, step number 5 is an interesting one, because if you have done everything that you can up until this point, if you have made the effort to find out and gain an understanding of why they're struggling and where they're struggling, if you have identified what it is they need, if you have then co-created an action plan with them and educated them on the details of the action plan based upon what it is they need, their thoughts, their feelings, because they've co-created it with you, and you've even taken the time to stop and learn from that and better yourself moving forward, if you still have a client that is difficult, disruptive, unmotivated, stubborn, argumentative, then feel free to do step number 5, which is let go of your client. Okay? Don't be scared of that. Don't be worried about that. It will be more detrimental to your coaching business, your mindset, your energy, and your other clients if you simply try to cling on to a client that is just adamantly going to be disruptive, difficult, argumentative, stubborn, unmotivated, taking no action, taking no responsibility, creating no changes, not doing anything to shift their perspective, not doing anything to raise their awareness, not doing anything to gain an understanding of other people's viewpoints in their life, and are simply sitting in that place of that victim mindset, that place of difficulty. Feel free to do step number 5, which is to let your client go. Don't be scared of it. The energy will negatively affect your client, your other clients, and your business. You want to be putting your focus and attention into the clients that are ready to take responsibility for their actions, which is 99.9% of them. We're talking about that small 0.1% that end up being very, very difficult at this stage. And you've gone through all of those other parts of the process, and they still are in a position where they don't want to be helped. They can't be helped. You can't get through. Don't be scared of step number 5, letting go of your client. So I hope that was interesting. I hope that it was insightful. It is something that people and coaches do experience naturally. You will experience it at some point. But always bear in mind those 2 mindsets that I spoke about at the beginning. Those 2 things, those 2 thoughts to remember. Let's at least in the beginning really cut these clients some slack, because change is difficult. And people get stuck at different places for different reasons. So if we always have that mindset and we take them through the 5 steps, we're putting us and them in a much stronger position where we may very well be able to help them. And that's what coaching is all about.